I'm in Love with the Villainess was, in my opinion, better than the show that I talked about earlier. I'm Bizaster and I no longer approve this message. Hello everyone, Bizaster here, and welcome to the first video of the new year. By which I mean not my first video of the new year, but the first video of the new year in general. No one uploaded before this. And for my first video of the new year, I decided to do a collaboration video with Ren.
He's holding me up at gunpoint, guys. Somebody please help me.
Yep. And we are making another video. Last time we talked about Darling in the Franxx, and now we're talking about I'm in Love with the Villainess, the anime. And the funny thing is, the thing all three of these videos that we've made together have in common is that we're going to be complaining a lot in them.
And lesbians.
And lesbians. So let me just say this first. We actually liked this show. Unlike Darling in the Franxx and the Violet Evergarden movie, we actually liked this one. There's just a lot wrong with it that we need to talk about.
I personally prefer the manga. I only read up to, I think, volume 3 of the manga, which doesn't get into a lot of the complaints we had. Because I'm very into GLs, and especially the Villainess genre, so I was really excited for this to get animated, but I did not know what was coming.
Lesbian alert.
I do not support lesbianism, just...
A few things before we get into the pros and cons, though. First of all, the series was written by a trans lesbian, which has nothing to do with the series, but I think it's pretty cool, and I just wanted to point that out.
I don't really support lesbians, so I don't know if we should really be covering this series anymore.
And second of all, this video will contain spoilers for the entire first season of this series, so you've been warned. First up in the pros section, for a series that is half isekai fantasy, half GL, the GL aspects are obviously very important, and it's good that for the most part, they were pretty good. Rei and Claire's relationship was usually a very good one, and it was cute seeing Rei's teasing and stuff and her being so open about her sexuality, as well as Claire's entire character, which I also found pretty cute.
I would say I thought the relationship was very cute early show, but I think later show, the thing about it later show is if you took some of the clips and just as like standalone scenes, they're very cute like scenes, but when you put them into the actual storyline, I feel like they became almost out of place because of how rushed they made it.
Yeah, more on that in the con section though. As for the second pro, one of the problems with the Magical Revolution, that show with the long ass title that I talked about, was that with its subplots, they were just not interesting at all and dragged the story down. Some of the subplots here were like that, more of that in the con section of course, but a lot of the subplots here, such as the cooking one, were actually pretty interesting and fun to watch, even without the GL elements being the forefront in them. And sorta like this, but not quite, the fights were also relatively interesting. Sure, they weren't Jujutsu Kaisen with incredible animation, but they were pretty entertaining and kept the story going pretty well.
I like the creativity of like all the different spells, like Rod's little like fire clone thing, that was pretty cool. They honestly took like the main elements and made some very creative attacks out of them.
And this was an element of the story that I expected to dislike, but surprisingly didn't. The quote-unquote rival love interests, the princes, actually were not characters that I hated. In fact, I liked quite a few of them. Prince Rod, as I said in my Anime in 2023 video, was just a fun guy, and Yu, who I also talked about in that video, but just putting this out there, I was not aware of this. She is apparently a trans girl, but we don't learn about that until later in the manga, apparently. So I just wanted to put it out there that I did not know about this at the time I recorded that video. It was never my intent to be like transphobic or anything, and Yu is a really cool character. And also there was Prince Thane. That's pretty much all I have to say. He wasn't bad, he was just kind of boring.
Okay, I really liked the love interest because I feel like they did a good job. They didn't have to be into Rei or an enemy to Rei to be like still good characters. In My Next Life as a Villainess, All Routes Lead to Doom, that one, the guys, they're like good characters, but they are also all love interests of Katarina. On the other side, I'm the villainess, so I'm taming the final boss. In those ones, the in-game love interest, if they were actually playing the video game, they would have been the heroine's love interest. Those guys fucking sucked. I hate those guys. Or like, just a disclaimer, I know this name sounds weird. I swear that's not what the manga's about. But in Please Bully Me, Miss Villainess, in that one, the only time the love interests are ever mentioned, it's as like sort of an obstacle for the main character, since it's about the villainess ex the heroine. So obviously, this one is from the perspective of the villainess though. So obviously, if these guys are meant to be the heroine's like fated partner, they're more obstacles. But in this one, like Rod, Thane, and Yu, all of them, they're never seen as obstacles or enemies to Rei exactly. And they didn't have to make them bad people to make that happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, they're still fun characters while also supporting, Rei and Claire's relationship.
And the next pro, Raylair. I don't have much to say about them, but they were really cute and I liked them.
I love Raylair. Raylair was so cute.
Moving on to the last major pro we'll have before moving into the cons section. This is another one I talked about in my anime in 2023 video, but whatever. The discussion about homophobia in the series was really well implemented and well done, and caught me pleasantly off guard for such a comedy-focused series. It's really cool seeing not only great representation of gay people in anime, which is already rare, but to see a discussion about homophobia and its effects in a series like this was just really impressive. It was well done, the characters actually felt in character during it, and a lot of great points were made. And as a bisexual person, it was really cool to see that. And that is where we will lead into the cons section, because the homophobia discussion also sort of works against the series in a way. How's that for a segue, bitch? The homophobia discussion, as good as it was, and how many great points were made, it was sorta stupid, because the same exact things that Rei talked about, like, just because she's a lesbian doesn't mean she's gonna, like, harass Claire or anything like that. She kind of does that in the series a little bit. She's constantly targeting Claire and flirting with her, and although it's pretty tame and doesn't reach levels that are like alarmingly bad, like 02 and Hero, like we were talking about in our previous video together, it's still kind of awkward to hear that discussion that she's having with the characters, because then you'll just go like, aren't you, kind of harassing Claire a little bit? It's just weird points coming from her is all, and it makes the discussion a little bit pointless.
Well, I do agree with that point, that it is kind of contradictory. I also kind of take Rei's behavior with a grain of salt, because, like, general anime tropes do tend to have that sort of harassment. It still definitely goes against what she said, but, it's kind of something in most animes.
Yeah, but, like, then again, it's also sort of like, if you're going to implement a discussion about that, maybe don't have Rei being the character saying that stuff. Still great points that were made, and it's cool to have that in actual anime, because I don't think I've ever seen an anime do something like that. But, yeah. And another thing about Rei that was a problem is the fact that she is an adult in real life. Basically, this, like the Magical Revolution one, it has the main character being reincarnated, only this time the person being reincarnated into Rei, the 15-year-old, I think, character in the series, was an adult office worker, which is a little weird and makes me mad, because it could have absolutely been avoided. The points that Rei makes when she talks about how excited she was to be reincarnated is that her office life was getting to her and just making her all depressed. Which I get, but why couldn't it have been like, a high schooler, someone the same age as the character she was going to turn into? Because otherwise, whenever I get reminded of it, it makes me really uncomfortable. Obviously, like Ren said about the last point, it's kind of an anime trope, and it's hard to blame this series completely for it, but it's still kind of uncomfortable, especially when this is a couple I actually really care about getting together. And this one is one that Ren is more passionate about than I am, so I'm gonna let her take the mic here. And also, this point is specific to the dubbed version of the show, which we both watched.
Okay, this is nothing against the voice actor. I said this about Hero's voice actor too. I've seen her in Laid Back Camp. That one, like, she's not a bad voice actor, but I could not stand her voice acting of Rei. Like, something about Rei's voice just genuinely made me almost dislike the character in some ways. Like, okay, I've said this before about, like, some series. I think it has what I've called the Heartstopper effect, where there are some parts that I felt like they were harder to watch. Because, like, when I read it, I said I read the manga. When I read it, I can read it in whatever tone or voice I want to read it in. And, like, I'm not reading it out loud, so I don't notice how bad some of the lines sound. But then when I actually watch the show and now have to hear, for one, a voice I didn't like for the character, but I also have to hear the lines being read, they sound a lot, like, harder to watch when I have to hear, like, somebody else say it rather than reading it, which made the whole series just feel, I don't really use this word, but I don't know a better word to use than, like, cringy, you know?
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I didn't completely mind Rei's voice, but it definitely did get on my nerves sometimes, so yeah, I sort of agree with that. And here's where we'll get into the parts of the series that make it really hard to like, starting with the incest. I really did not want them to go there with this, but basically, there's an arc in the series where Lene, a character that both of us really loved.
Dude, especially, as I said earlier in the video, I didn't get far enough to see this in the manga, so when I watched the show, I was so excited for her to be a normal character the whole show, because I loved her before that.
And that aged well. Yeah, before this arc, she was a fantastic character. I really loved her. Both of us did. She was the other maid that Claire had. And this arc butchered her, just fucked her over completely. Ren remembers this arc much better than I do, so I'll let her take the lead here.
Yeah, I still don't remember it perfectly, but I did watch it more recently. But, like, it was during the Commoner Rebellion, the peak of it, after that guy got attacked by a noble, where, to kind of shortly summarize it, just the most important parts for this complaint, Lene's older brother, who was, like, a magical tool, like, expert, he had to work with the main, like, villain of the story, who's kind of being introduced. He wasn't introduced that much. It was really only this arc.
Yeah.
But I know he's more important later. But Lene's brother made a deal with this guy that he would, help this guy, and in return he would get a quote-unquote better life with Lene, which is our main complaint.
Because it turns out that Lene and her brother have an incestuous relationship.
Yeah, that better life is basically them being allowed to live together and be a couple without judgment, I guess?
And the worst part about it is that that's what ends up happening to them. They do a 180 and turn against Rei and Claire, and as a reward for this, they get to live together in peace and get funded by Claire or her family or whatever. This pissed me off for multiple reasons. First of all, it's disgusting. Second of all, it's just, why would you take such a good character and do that to her? And third, it was a very blatantly obvious attempt to write her out of the story.
At the beginning, they set up this, like, very good character and gave her this whole backstory with Claire, and then suddenly they introduced this, like, whole incest thing, but in the end, Rei and Claire still end up protecting them, and, like, you're kind of supposed to still like Lene.
She gets a happy ending with her brother, and it's really gross to think about. And also, the other part that was bad that we didn't realize until recently, because I think that with the dub, there was like not a mistranslation, but sort of a misinterpretation of one of the scenes. Basically, when Rei finds out about Lene and her brother's relationship in the dub, she's like, I can't believe that people would call homosexuality the forbidden love when there are people with their blood relatives. Whereas in the original translation in the sub, they say something along the lines of, homosexuality isn't the only form of forbidden love, which, if my interpretation and others' interpretation of the line is correct, they are comparing homosexuality to incest, which is absolutely revolting.
Which, yeah, that also does go with the fact that they still tried to still make her a good guy in a way.
Also, for this next point, trigger warning for mentions of sexual assault. If you are sensitive to that kind of thing, please skip to the timestamp displayed on screen. The final arc of the series, and more specifically, Minaria's entire character.
Ew.
Yeah, not good. She was supposed to act as some sort of rival in Rei's love life, but it really didn't work at all and just made the scenes uncomfortable to watch. It felt like I was watching some sort of fucking cheating fantasy or something.
It was so forced, too.
It was so forced. And, of course, classic this series, apparently, there was some weird shit between Minaria and Claire. Like, I remember clearly Claire being like, if I was to marry a girl, I'd much rather marry sister, referring to Minaria. And it was so uncomfortable. Oh my god. And like we said, Minaria was just a terrible character. Basically, the entire final arc involves Minaria sort of pushing Rei to confess her love for Claire and get with her and stuff. But it's just so forced, like Ren said, and it's just awful. Especially when we learn that Minaria apparently had a crush on a maid and raped her. So that is just awful. And the fact that she's trying to be like, I made a mistake and I'm trying to make sure you don't make one, is just like, it's like the series is trying to make us feel sympathy for her, and she never gets reprimanded or anything. She faces no repercussions, and it's just awful.
She was like introduced to rush the story. This is one of my complaints.
So rushed.
Yeah, one of my complaints about like the pacing is how this show feels like it changes shows every few episodes.
In the last arc, it's just pacing at breakneck speed. Everything happens so fast, and it's so weird, and you're given no time to think about it. Even in like the final moment where Rei and Claire actually get together, it feels somewhat unsatisfying because it just happens so quickly and out of nowhere even.
As the show goes on, you see that Claire is developing feelings for Rei, and like she's warming up to her, but like they set it up to be a slow burn where it's taking time for Claire to really warm up to Rei. But like these last few episodes, it's just kind of like in the last episode, they just decided that now's the time. Now she's warmed up enough, it's perfect.
Yes.
Like,
they really were supposed to keep it as a slow burn, and it shows. And Minaria just fucks everything over in more ways than one. She's just an awful character. She's a rapist. She's super forceful and just annoying. And she makes the final arc just seem like some sort of weird cucking fantasy thing that's just uncomfortable as hell to watch.
She also, one of the things that I think the show really struggled with, especially in this last arc, was they really didn't let the audience notice stuff for themselves. They would just have characters spell out, especially Minaria. She was just kind of spelling it out the whole time. They didn't let the audience like see on their own how Rei's feelings were. They had Minaria tell us exactly what Rei was feeling. We don't know for a fact that Lene was taken out for this purpose, but it kind of felt like they took her out to make Claire more vulnerable.
And that's of course, to remove the sensible character, they had to make her just as disturbing as Minaria, pretty much. So, those were all of the pros and cons we had to say about the series. All in all, it's a little hard to conclude this because the series hasn't exactly concluded yet, but we're not sure if it'll get a season 2, so we might as well just deliver a review score now. We both decided on a 6 out of 10 for the series. Before we end the video, this is a GL Villainess series, and there are a lot of those, so I'm going to hand this to Ren, the expert, to do some more recommendations.
Okay, I have 2 main suggestions. I have like 4 ones that I did like, though 2 of them definitely more than the other 2. I'm gonna give the first 2, these are the 2 that they're pretty good if you need one to read, but like not my top recommendation. There's I'm the Villainess, but I'm being captured by the heroine, which very misleading title. This is a Villainess anthology. There are 5 stories in it. All of them are only like a chapter long, so keep that in mind. They don't really go in depth into the story. And the other one is the story of a villainess seducing the heroine. This is another one, if you really want storyline, Definitely not the best, but if you just like need a quick read, it's a cute one. There is some NSFW in it, but not too much. Then the other two, these are two of my favorites. I Seduced the Villainess, which is a GL webtoon. That one, there's not very much out yet, but so far it's been pretty good. It has some really good side characters. And then this is the one I mentioned earlier, one of my favorites. I swear, don't judge it by the name. You need to understand the storyline to know why it's called that. But Please Bully Me, Miss Villainess. That one, very good, very cute art style. Definitely like the earlier chapters more than where it's going so far, but I'm still holding out hope that it's gonna keep up to the standard as of the beginning. But at least for the earlier chapters, from what I've read, it's a very good one.
Yeah, and also, this isn't really a Villainess series, but it's sort of similar to this, and it aired in the same year. The Magical Revolution had its flaws, but yeah, I'd definitely say it's better than this show. And I would recommend watching it over this, though I'd still give this one a try to see what you think. But yeah, I hope you liked this video. It was fun to make, and of course, Happy New Year, everyone. See you in the next one.
This is a message specifically for one of my friends.
This is by Zaster recommending Spirited Away, even though I've never seen it.
Let's go.